Is anyone else surprised that it's already time for another reading wrap up? Because I only do these every 2 months and yet they still come really, really quickly. The day I'm filming this, it's currently February 29th, which, happy leap year, crazy stuff, but that also means that it's the last day of February and therefore time for both my January and my February reading wrap up. I'm excited. I actually read 9 books in January and February, and for me, that's like the top, like the max number of books that I'm usually able to read in a 2-month period. And so I'm feeling very proud and accomplished and so excited to talk to you about the books. So without further ado, let's just do it. And yes, for anyone wondering, this is still lemon water. My fixation has not changed. Okay, so the first book that I read in 2024 was Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is one of my all-time favorite books in the world. I actually did a full annotation when I read it this time. This was a reread for me. If you guys are looking for something that's just gonna make you smile and feel all the good feelings on the inside, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this book. This is a romance story that follows Macy and Elliot, and it's a then and now timeline. And basically in the then timeline, Elliot and Macy are growing up together and falling in love as kids, and they bond over reading and like vocabulary and words, and it's really, really cute. But in the present timeline, they haven't spoken in 10 years and we don't know why, and you get to see them like reconnect and fall in love, and it's just so good and so special. This book really is just a nostalgic read for me, and again, just annotating it was so much fun. I did give this 5 stars. I'm so happy that I read this again. I actually don't know if you guys can tell, I did a lot of annotating in the beginning of this year. I didn't really realize that I did so much annotating until I put all the books together and realized how many of them were like very extremely tabbed. So that was a pleasant little surprise. Okay, the next book that I read in January was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. This is the prequel to the Throne of Glass series. And once again, I did a full annotation of this book. And this was my first time reading The Assassin's Blade. Prior to reading this book, I had read the first like 2.5 books in this series, but I'd never read the prequel before, and I decided that in 2024 I want to do a full reread of that series and finish it. But I'd never read the prequel before, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And doing my reread and like reading this book towards the beginning, I think I would recommend people start with the prequel. There's a lot of debate on how to go about this series. I personally would recommend starting here because continuing through the series, I felt like I understood so many different things so much better and more deeply. But this whole series and fantasy universe follows a girl named Selena, who in the first book, again, this is the prequel, but in the first book of this series, she gets entered in this like competition to become the king's champion, which basically means becoming his personal little assassin. And it's so much fun. The world is so great. The characters are incredible. And again, this book kind of sets you up to see how she got to where that first book starts, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I would give it 10 if I could. Like, that is literally how much I love this book. I mean, guys, this is the best start to a reading year I've ever had. 2 5 stars in a row. Granted, this one was a reread, but still, that's pretty wild for me. The next book that I read in January is The One by Kiera Cass. This was another reread for me. I read the entire Selection series, I want to say when I was in middle school, long time ago. And then probably 6 to 8 months ago, I found the entire 3-book series at a thrift store. And to me, it was like a sign from the universe that I needed to reread this series. And I enjoyed it. Like, it was very nostalgic. This series is a YA dystopian world where we follow our main character, America Singer, and she gets entered in this competition called the Selection. And in the Selection, the prince of this kingdom called Ilya, he's looking for his wife out of 30 girls. And each of the girls get picked from different casts, and America doesn't want to be there, but she gets picked, and it follows their little romance, we'll say, but there's a lot more to it. There's like rebels and political intrigue. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I'm just not a love triangle girly, and there is like a pretty prominent love triangle in this series. This was really fun. Really just enjoyed it, I think, for the nostalgia, and it felt good to finish out my reread of that series. Okay, the next book I did read on my Kindle. I checked it out from the library, and that book is Circe by Madeline Miller. I am a huge fan of Madeline Miller's other book, The Song of Achilles. It was one of the first books that I read when I was getting back into reading, and because that book did break me, like as broken as I could be from a book, is what happened to me when I read that. I think it made me push off reading Circe for like a long time. But one of my good friends, we did a book club together, and our little pick for our book club was Circe, and it was the perfect motivation to read it. And I loved this book. It was so, so fun. I will say though, this story is very much no plot, just vibes. I was very curious to see how Madeline Miller wove the Greek mythology story of Circe into a novel, if that makes sense, because what I knew about Circe was that she was banished by the gods because she was a witch and she lived on this island, and sailors would kind of just come and go and visit her when they pleased. That's pretty much all that I knew going into it. And so I was really wondering how Madeline Miller was going to turn that idea into a story. And really, it kind of was just like what I knew about Greek mythology. A lot of like mini plot arcs and story arcs were happening. And I wouldn't say there was one big overarching issue or mission. But with all that said, I still really loved it. I felt like it was a beautiful character study. The writing was incredibly lyrical. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It did lose my attention a little bit in the middle. The beginning and the end I personally thought were really good, but the middle I was like waiting for things to happen, you know? But I would still highly recommend it. It was so fun and just such a beautiful reading experience. That was the kind of book that I wish I had a physical copy of so I could write all over it, because there were so many beautiful lines in it. The next book that I read, I think we're entering February now, end of January, early February, is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Now, before all of the Throne of Glass girlies come for me, I know you're probably like, Olivia, what order are you reading this in? Please don't come for me. For my reread, I ended up reading Throne of Glass, then Assassin's Blade, and then Crown of Midnight. I thought it wouldn't do any harm, right? I was like, oh, I've already read these before. I'm just going to throw the prequel in here. Keep in mind, I wasn't expecting to love the prequel. So I was being very casual about the whole thing. Next time I would go in the proper order, but that's just what happened. And I'm so sorry that I read it like that. But it ended up being totally fine. This book, again, so how is it possible that we've had so many good books so far? I simply don't know. I'm not going to say much about this book at all, just because it would spoil other books in this series. But essentially we continue to follow Selena and her journey as an assassin in this world. I feel like that's all I'm going to say. I did do a reading vlog about this if you're more curious what my reactions to it were. And I pretty much loved everything about this. I felt like the plot was incredible. The characters were so much more fleshed out and developed. So many good things were going on in this book. And the one thing that I really just did not enjoy about this book at all is the romance. I'm not going to say more. If you know, you know. If you've read this series, I'm very curious to hear what you thought about the romance in this book, because I didn't like it. I still don't like it. And for me, if there's romance in a book, I want to like that romance, if that makes sense. So the only thing that made this book less than perfect was the romance. So for that reason, I ended up rating this a 4.75. All else I thought was perfect. Okay, so now we're in the month of February, and I don't know what came over me. I really don't. I was like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. I should read some romance books. And then all I wanted to do for the entire month of February was burn through romance as much as I could. It's all I wanted to do. Like literally the thought of another book so unappealing. So in a TBR wheel video that I'd done, The Bodyguard by Catherine Center got selected, and I checked it out from my library, read it on my Kindle, and I had a good time reading it. I honestly expected to like it a little bit more than I did. Unfortunately, it is a book about a girl who is a bodyguard, which I think is so cool and badass, having the female main character be the bodyguard. And for an assignment that she gets put on, she has to go and protect this celebrity. And of course, they fall in love. Who's surprised? Not me. And I personally, there were a few things that I didn't love about it. I didn't love our main character. I didn't love a lot of the side characters. And I just felt like there were a few little plot holes, or I don't know if plot hole's the right word, but like logic holes. Like one thing about our main girl is her whole job is to be able to read people really well, read a room, read a situation. And like she could not tell that Jack Stapleton, our male main character, was in love with her. You'd think she'd be able to pick up on that, but she couldn't. Anyway, it was really fun. I gave this book 3 stars. I would still absolutely recommend it. It was a closed door romance, which I really, really enjoy. And yeah, there was so much good about it. I just wanted a little bit more depth from a romance for it to get a higher review from me. So I read The Bodyguard thinking that it would get the whole romance bug out of my system. It absolutely didn't. If anything, I was feeling a little bit unsatisfied, like I needed something else. So I literally wasn't planning on reading this book until summertime. But it was one of the only romance books I had on my shelf, and it was all that I wanted to do was, again, just sit down and read romance books. So I randomly picked up It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. My cousin gave this to me. I had little to no expectations going into it, and I had a blast. This book follows the story of Brendan and Piper is this very, I don't know if stuck up is the right word, but entitled LA girl. And she gets in a lot of trouble at the beginning of this book, and her stepdad is like, you're pretty much banished to this little village not a village, to this little Pacific Northwest town. And so she goes and meets Brendan, our crab fisherman king, who is very type A, like does not like her at all at the beginning, super grumpy dude. And the thing that I actually really liked about this book is I felt like Tessa Bailey did a really good job exploring each of the stages of their relationship. I don't know how to get into that more deeply without kind of spoiling things that do happen in this book. I just felt like each stage of the relationship was really thoroughly explored versus them meeting and then all of a sudden them saying I love you and me feeling like unsatisfied. It just felt a little more reasonable. With that said, I do feel like the characters are a little bit stereotypical, and there were a lot of other things about this book that were unrealistic, but I did still just have a fantastic time reading this book. I ended up giving it, originally I gave it 4 stars, but then I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sometimes you're just surprised by the books that do that to you. And so because I couldn't stop thinking about it, I bumped it up to a 4.25. Did not see that coming at all. If you're thinking that was the last romance book I read in February, you would be wrong. I ended up filming an entire romance reading vlog that I wanted to get out before this video and my March TBR video. It just didn't happen. So I think that's going to be the next video that you guys see. And in that video, I read It Happened One Summer, The Bodyguard, and A Touch of Darkness, the 3rd and final romance book that I read in February. So if you guys are interested in a more thorough review and reaction to all these books, get pumped because the reading vlog is coming soon. Now this book, a little different than It Happened One Summer. This is a Hades Persephone retelling. I love Greek retellings. Obviously, I read Circe, so I was curious to see how I felt about this book because I've read some Greek retellings that I loved and others that I didn't. Again, I just had a good old time with this book. It was just exactly what you could ask for a fun, fluffy romance little reading vlog. This book, in the retelling, the gods have like moved into modern day. So this book has like all the Greek gods running their own businesses, and I thought the world building could have been better. The romance like did not explore certain important things, or like things that I felt would have been important for a realistic romantic relationship, but it was still fun. And again, exactly what I needed. And by the time I finished this book, I finally felt like I could pick up another genre. So in my mind, that was a win. And I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. I liked it. Like, it did exactly what I needed it to do, but it wasn't anything super special. And this is also a very spicy romance book, so keep that in mind if you're considering picking this up. Okay, and the last book that I read in February, today is February 29th. I did start another book, but there's no way that I'm finishing that before the month ends. It's just not gonna happen. So I know for sure that the last book that I read in February was The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. A lot of the books that I read in this video were the books that got picked in both my January and February TBR Wheel videos, so I'm feeling very proud of that. This was one of them. And I personally am really, really into financial independence and understanding your money and all of that kind of stuff. This is like a collection of parables that take place in ancient Babylon that follow the richest man in Babylon. And he is sharing his wisdom about how he became the richest man in Babylon and how he saved his money and accumulated wealth. And a lot of those strategies are still extremely relevant today. So a really great example of this is in one of the parables, people are coming to him for advice. My camera storage just filled up. I was really worried that that was going to happen, and then we were getting close to the end and I was like, oh, maybe that won't happen. It totally did. Basically, in one of the parables, he was suggesting that for every 10 pieces of silver that you get or that you earn, save 1 piece of silver and pay yourself. And that's just wonderful, like, advice for the modern world as well. And this whole book just contains really wonderful, like, wisdom and advice that you can apply to your current financial wellness and independence. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. It was surprisingly entertaining. The parables were really, really great. And I was kind of like laughing a little, and I wrote a lot of notes in the margins, and I just really, really enjoyed this. I don't really rate books like this, but if I was, just know that it would be a high rating. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. People don't talk about stuff like this, but I would highly recommend reading this if you want to like tackle your own financial independence and success. We are strong, independent, financially smart women. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, you guys, those were all of the books that I read in January and February. The day that I'm filming this, I posted my March TBR Wheel video, and I've literally never gotten so lucky in a TBR Wheel video in my life. So if you want to just see me having the best time ever with the TBR Wheel, just magically selecting all of the books that I want to read in March, please go check that out, because that was a great time. And the last little thing that I wanted to do for those of you who made it this far in the video is give some little subscriber shout outs, because you guys are literally making my entire days. I am just having so much fun. So first of all, I wanted to give a shout out to Starla. You comment on every single video, and it is so, so sweet, and I adore it. So thank you so much. And then I also wanted to shout out Chelsea, who I've been talking to in the comments in a lot of my videos, and I just really appreciate you guys. So I thought subscriber shout outs would be something that we could start doing. I'm really loving it when all of you guys put your name in the comments. I'm having so much fun because I'm starting to remember who you guys are and your interests and all that good stuff. So yeah, thank you to everybody who watches these videos, is subscribed to the channel. Comment down below if you want to potentially get a shout out in the next video. And I think that's it from me. I hope you guys are having a great day and a great reading month, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.